more people. We've gotten big groups the last 2 weeks.
You can sit up and say it to you.
You can come closer if you want. You guys come closer too,
You don't have to answer questions. It's not like it.
Because also as people come for arati, people will get everybody stuck in the back and we have this.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like something's wrong with me or something. Share. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 11 of these. We have 12 people. Hymnals for today. There's an extra verse that's not from last week. That's why. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devye Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Vrindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Madhyamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Om Bhadra Kālī Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Vera Viranga Veranta Vijjastanebhya Evacha Sri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Ma Jai Ma. I'm very happy to see everybody here for another exciting topics of thousands and thousands and thousands of names of the Divine Mother. So we are, last week where did we finish? We finished in the middle of verse 27, we're doing the Kāli Sahasranāma for those online. Kāli Sahasranāma, 1,000 names of Goddess Kāli. And we've been going name by name over a long period of time. And actually this is a big, where are we? 195 of 1,000, so we're doing pretty good. Looking along. So verse 27, you see? You have?
This is the last week.
Yes. Yes. Oh, what's your verse? 189. Ends at 189. Veda Vibhushana?
Yes.
All of them were like that? Mm-hmm. I don't know what I typed wrong. Never mind. So 189 ends. Oh, I see. It's this. I don't know how I did that. I thought I typed right. Well, forgive me. You have to look online. I'll print them up. I'll post them on the class, on the lecture tonight, on the Facebook. As soon as we're done, I'll put them up so you have them. You have to listen carefully. So anyway, the verse that we did, I'll recite the verse we were working on last week. We got halfway through. Śrutiḥ smṛtir smṛtir-mahā-vidyā, guhya-vidyā, purātanī. That's how far we got. cintyācintyā Svadhā, nidrā, tandrā, pārvatī. Śrutiḥ. So we went śrutiḥ, smṛtir-mahā-vidyā, guhya-vidyā. And so basically we're talking about the difference between Shruti means Vedas. We talked about that, and also that she is Vedamayi at the previous week. Vedamayi and Veda Vibhushana, decorated by the Vedas. So identifying Devi with the knowledge contained in the Vedas, identifying her with also the Vedic tradition. But by saying Veda Vibhushana, it's not just she's the Vedic tradition, but she's the Vedic tradition decorates her, right? So she's greater in the Vedic tradition. And so then the Shruti and Smriti is the second category of literature. Either we think of like the Puranas, the Mahabharata, these type of texts we'd put into the Smriti that don't have the same sanctity of the Vedic of the Shruti, but for the most part, when people think Vedas, they think Smriti, not Shruti. Most people don't study. People may study maybe an Upanishad or something, or chant Mahamrityunjaya mantra or something like that, right? But for the most part, mainstream Hinduism or pan-Indian Hinduism, I don't say common is belittling, but this is what most people are practicing. They study the Gita, you read the Puranas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, so it's that category. And then the next verse it said, next name, Mahā-vidyā. We said that could be reference to the Mahavidyas, as we mentioned. But Mahā-vidyā is also a name for the Upanishads, the great knowledge, the spiritual knowledge of Brahman, the great knowledge. And then guhya-vidyā, which could also be the Upanishadic revelation, but most likely because we tried to argue for last week that this is reference to the tantras, right? By guhya-vidyā, so you have the Vedas, the Puranas, and secondary literature, and you have the tantras. And I was thinking in trying to fall asleep. This is one of the reasons I can't sleep. I think of, but I forgot. There's one mantra, there's one verse that I should have. Like, what is that verse? Somewhere I have it in my notes. I looked in my notes and sure I found it. Right. Whether or not I have it here. This is from Manusmriti. So it's interesting. Manusmriti is definitely not Shruti. It's not Vedas. Manusmriti means written by man. Manu means man, right? Written by an important man, perhaps in the ancient times, right? It's a easy to beat up text, right? And one of the reasons why it was probably one of the first texts to be translated by those who are trying to discredit the Indian tradition. It was the most controversial text dealing with caste restrictions and all these type of things. But it's a great picture of the ancient world's understanding, right, of how the things were practiced. And there's a mantra very interesting. It says Vaidika Tantrika Chaiva Dvi-vidha śrutiḥ. So it's defining Shruti or Vedas. What's her text? It says Dvi-vidha. There's two categories of Shruti, right? Vaidika and Tantrika. The Vedic mantras and the Tantric mantras. Both are considered according to Manu, or that. It was there? You found them. Good. Just see. Vaidikam Tantrika Chaiva Dvi-vidha śrutiḥ. Vedic and Tantric are the two types of Shruti. And we hinted a little bit, I made the point last week, because I didn't chant the mantra last week, that, and maybe bring it up a little bit more, because this list of 1,000 names of Kāli is very steeped in Tantric lore, right? You have to understand a lot of Tantra to flesh out the mantras, the meanings of the mantras, interpretation of the mantras. And there's agamas and nigamas, tantric texts, they have their own self-understanding. You could say, the tantras are very ancient tradition, they're pre-Vedic, they're indigenous tradition, and there's an argument like that. But usually we mean the tantras, they're actually not old at all. They're actually quite young. Some of them are, 400 years old, 300. That's still old, older than me, Some of them are 800 years old. They're not that old generally, right? And there's other texts that are part of that Shakta, Shaivai tradition that became vocalized more boldly in the tantras that go further back, and like Devi Bhagavatam and Markandeya Purana, Chandi, and things like that, which are old enough. But but still, the claim is that even though a tantric text may be 700 years old and not 9,000 years old, like Rig Veda claims to be, or something like this, right? Yet they're both considered śrutiḥ in the same category. Is meant a little bit that this is one way of interpreting what does it mean that the Vedas come from Brahman, right? Or that the Vedas are eternal, right? One way to think of it, the way it's come down to us, most people think, although it's probably not the original way it was understood, is like they come from the absolute. They emanate from the absolute, and therefore potentially other scriptures can emanate from the absolute. People can discover them in different times. So that's one way of thinking of it. And the view of the Tantra is a self-revelation of these, like Mahanirvana. This view is well articulated in texts like Mahanirvana Tantra and Kulanavarna Tantra, some of the late Tantras, we consider late Tantras. They kind of summarized all these ideas. And you end up with a conversation between Shiva and Parvatī saying, in Kālī Yuga, right, there's no Vedic mantras. Right? Nobody knows Vedic mantras. If they know them, they don't know what they mean. They're not pronouncing them properly. They don't have the lifestyle to support them. So practically speaking, anything done with Vedic mantras has no meaning. So if you're, it even makes a bold statement like, if you've been married by Vedic mantras, you're not married, because the mantras have no power. If something has to, like somebody who's not a judge declaring you married or something like that, or somebody who, by the power not invested with me in such a pronouncement doesn't mean anything, right? So similarly, pronouncement by Vedic mantras. This is the claim. I think Mahanirvana Tantra makes such a statement, right? Only Vedic mantras count nowadays, and because this is sectarian, they also the tantrics are also sectarian in nature, almost always. So they have a agenda, right? But they're saying that in Kālī Yuga, the Vedas are no longer accessible, right? And therefore, out of compassion, the Lord, the same Lord that's revealed in the Vedas as Ishvara, as Brahman, right? Happens, in case you're wondering, his name is Shiva. Or Kāli or Durga, like it's Shiva or Shakti, right? That same Lord, it's a Shaivite Shiva Shakti tradition generally, but Pancharatra Tantras make that Lord is Narayan, right? And his consort Lakshmi. So out of love for humankind, either Narayan asked Lakshmi or Lakshmi asked Narayan, or Vishnu or Shiva asked Parvatī or Parvatī asked Shiva. So in Kālī Yuga, what is a way where people can still realize you? People can still have the knowledge of Brahman. People can still perform rites and rituals and gain both happiness in this world, happiness in the next world, release from the world of birth and death. All those things that the Vedas are oriented towards, right? And so then Shiva or Parvatī or Lakshmi or Narayan answer the question, right? And so the claim is it's the Supreme Lord, who he's answering just like it was coming from Brahman. Like the Vedas were. So they're the same level of authenticity. So this verse kind of hints at that type of, it's coming from the divine itself, right? So anyway, I forgot. I made a promise. Many people last week, I have to go back to my Hanuman thing. So let me finish this point. This is still back. I'm cleaning up from last week, so I forgot the not Ganesh, Hanuman. Panchamukha Hanuman. Okay, yeah. I've also written those people saying I'm promised to speak about Hanuman. But smṛtir-mahā-vidyā, śrutiḥ-smṛtir-mahā-vidyā, guhya. So anyway, this is tantra. The tantras are considered equally valid by devotees who are following the tantras, considered the equal. But historically, you could say, there are later texts. They're easier to who wrote them, when were they written, what were they reacting against. We could say such things academically from you can probably do that to Upanishads and Samhitas and Brahmanas and the ancient texts also. But then we're just talking, to try to reconstruct something that happened, 100 years ago is difficult, right? To reconstruct something that would happen thousands of years ago is almost impossible. You can make educated guess as educated as you are, that's about it, right? So but tantras are not, because they're not as ancient in their completed forms, right? It's easier to to see them as conditioned, culturally generated texts, as not as pristine as the Vedic mantras like this. So verses like this help us, give us faith. No, these are also considered authoritative, but also in a certain sense, we all have our Vedas. I'm remembering 3 Kumbh Melas ago, we judge the world by how many Kumbh Melas you've been alive. 3 Mahakumbhas ago, my first Mahakumbha in Allahabad, there is one of our Guru Bhais named Premanand. He's from Ayodhya, and I had my little Gospel of Ramakrishna. I was young. The world was young. I was also young, reading my Gospel of Ramakrishna. He said, "What are you reading?" In Hindi, I tried to explain. He had no English, but I tried to explain. You look. Of course, he knew the book and things like that. Yeah. But I remember very boldly, I was like going, "This is my Veda, my Tantra, my Upanishads, my," I was like, because of my boldly, this is my Vedas, right? So it's to me, it's just as authoritative as the Vedas. So people think, so the Tantras to their followers are just as authoritative. It's coming from God. And you can see people of other religions will say their text is it's coming from God. It's divine. It's eternal. The unchanging truth of the Bible. We word like that. But anyway, so this is what it is. We won't go. I have all these verses on the nature of Tantras, but as we go into it, we'll go into it another time. Second point. Tantrikana. Why did I mention Panchmukha? Oh, because these verses mention Dakinis and Yoginis and Rakshashi. Ma is Dakini, Kinara, Yogini, Nagini, all these semi-divine beings that I mentioned, that these, although they're all forms of Ma and they're all divine beings, aspects of divinity, the hierarchy and the underworld and upper world of the multidimensional universe that we live in and the ancients lived in, yogis are still potentially scared of them, because as you tune your mind, you may come in contact, with different categories of astral, ghostly type of entities, and therefore there's Kavacha mantras, and I mentioned that I read from one Hanuman Kavacha mantra gives protection against from all these forms that Ma herself is identifying with in this text, right? So, and then I began to tell the story, and online people were asking where I don't know the connection on why Hanuman is a protector of these things, and why he is worshipped in Kālī temples and Devi temples. What's the connection? And I mentioned that I was very not concerned, but I never understood why every Shakti temple you go to, there's always a big Hanuman, right? And then later we found even Dakshineshwar has a Hanuman. Right, you wouldn't know it's not in public, but if you know the right people and you convince them to let you buy, you can find out there's daily. And as far as we know, that's been there since Thakur's time, a long time. Tiny concrete little temple by the Ganga and kind of a private garden that's not open to the public. Look, Hanuman's worshipped there. So where the text comes from, and so especially this Panchmukha Hanuman I mentioned last week, the 5-headed Hanuman is especially worshipped as protection by tantrics, right? Especially Kāli devotees, Shiva devotees, like that. And we think Rama Durare, that's the verse, right? So you are Rama's gatekeeper. You protect. No one enters his realm without your permission. So I was going to tell the story how Hanuman became Kāli's gatekeeper. So that's the point. So there is many Ramayanas, right? There is about 400 main extant Ramayanas, and probably many more variations. There's not just Valmiki's. You can say, Valmiki's is the most authoritative. You can say it like that. Tulsidas is the most famous, right? But there's many, many, many more, right? And there's probably some versions of the story that are older than Valmiki. And there's some versions, there's Buddhist Ramayanas, there's Jain Ramayanas, there's Shakta Ramayanas, right? There's all kinds. In the Jain Ramayana, Lord Ram is a Jain master. And so he, of course, cannot kill Ravana, because that would make him look bad. So Lakshman kills Ravana in that version, So that's an example of all those different types of Ramayanas. There's one Ramayana, is it called Adbhut Ramayana? The Adbhut Ramayana. Adbhut means strange Ramayana. Also means fantastic, wonderful, spiritual. Adbhut is like, has all those meanings. It's a strange Ramayana. And that Ramayana, which this story is roughly based upon, I'm going to tell, Ravana doesn't have 10 heads. He has 10,000 heads. Right? It's a different Ravana. It's like our Brahma only has 4 heads. There's been creations where Brahma has thousands of heads, right? So this is a small, fairly insignificant creation cycle. It's only a 4-headed Brahma and only a 10-headed Ravana, right? But in this version, right, Ravana had 10,000 heads, right? And after many, many days of battle, Ram couldn't kill Ravana, right? He was too powerful for even Ram to kill, right? So finally Sita gets annoyed by the whole process, right? Says, fine, I'll kill him, right? And then she becomes Mahakali, right? And she kills Ravana, right? And we heard, I mean, I've never, this is like, Kāli kills Ravana, not Ram. This is like for a shock that this is really good information. Yeah. We knew it. We knew Kāli did everything. Knew it. I just didn't dare say it, you know. And actually, a wonderful. His name was Milk Baba. You ever hear Milk? Maybe you remember Milk Baba. Anybody hear of Milk Baba? His name was Ramakrishna Das Babaji. He was from Dudari Baba. Yeah, and he came to America, he was known as Milk Baba. In India, he was known as Dudari Baba, milk drinking Baba. He lived in Nepal at the near Pashupatinath, near Pashupatinath. He just recently passed away. I think I saw online. And he came one time to America, and he for the last 70 years he only drinks he drinks some tea and 2 glasses of hot milk. That's his. And that's Dutari is a sadhana you can do, but it's actually itself is slightly miraculous, because what happens when you do like this for too much time, you end up with diarrhea. You don't have enough. The enzyme proportions are wrong. It's not easy to digest only milk, right? It's not that easy to digest milk, period. But the only milk is very difficult. But the fact that he was able to do it for so many years was impressive, you know. And anyways, he was sitting right there at that time. And he told, seeing Kāli, he started a couple things. He says that Ram, he also had huge jata, way longer than Ananda's, way longer than my wear, right? And he said Ram has jata, not only Shiva, and Kāli has jata. He said actually Kāli has wild hair, and Ram has. This is a proper look for a yogi. And then he told this story about Kāli killing Ravana, which I think is very interesting. But so in the similar category of these Shakta type Ramayanas, tantric, we probably classify them as tantric Ramayanas. There's one story where during the battle, Ravana's brother, Ahiravana, I think Ahiravana, like right? Makes sense? Somebody just say yes, so I don't look. No. Ahiravana, I think it's Ahiravana, and he was a sorcerer, right? Of the most malicious and malevolent type, and so he, in order to do his part of the battle with mantras, he trapped Ram and Lakshman, and he took them into the underworld, into Pataloka, right? Into the underworld. And if you want to go there, you can go to the underworld. It's at Allahabad, or right at the Sangam. There's a big Hanuman laying down. It's supposed to be the cave that this battle happened, and I'm sure it's 100% that. Wonderful Hanuman, very powerful Hanuman there. But he took him and he trapped them with mantras, with spells and incantations, right? And he was going to sacrifice Ram and Lakshman to goddess Kāli, his presiding deity, right? Remember, Chandi says both gods and demons worship her feet, right? There's an example. Demons also worship her. Everyone worships her, and only her actually. And so he had in order to control, he had cast some sort of a spell around, and with 5 lamps, right, to as protective, to control them, kind of like we'd imagine like a pentagram or something like that. If you were to a made-for-TV Netflix movie, something like that, something you can imagine like that, with a 5 like this. And he was sharpening the knife, and the axe cut off, and so this would not only he'd get the benefit of killing great kings and princes, right? To kill princes is a big deal, right? If you want to sacrifice, don't just sacrifice anybody. Kings, sages, and princes. That's a good thing. But also he'd satisfy he'd win the war for his cousin or cousin brother Ravan, and be amply rewarded. So Hanuman, seeing what happened to Ram and Lakshman, they've disappeared from battle. He has a lot of intelligence, and he could figure out where they went. And so he followed the trail, and he went into the underworlds, and he saw from a distance what was happening. He saw a statue of Mother Kāli, right? And he saw Ram and Lakshman bound by mantric ropes, and he saw the scene, what was happening, and he saw the 5 candles that were controlling him, the whole as the scene is described, and so he thinks what to do. And so in the Chalisa it also says Buddhi Hino. What is it that you're very intelligent, right? Does that one like that? Bala Buddhi Vidya. Yeah, he's really actually many times throughout Ramayana, when Ram's in trouble, Hanuman will give the right answer. He always knows just the perfect way to satisfy every condition. He's that's super. Not just how do I, because he's thinking what do I have to do? I have to like stop him from being sacrificed. I have to figure out. I have to kill the evil Ahiravana. I have to break the spell of the 5 candles or the pentagram type of thing, right? So he come up with the perfect thing. So he became really small. Everybody knows, right? So he became really, really small and buzzed and landed on Ram's ear and whispered, "This is the plan." It's like every good thing. Here's the plan, right? This is what you say when he wants to sacrifice. I'll do the rest, right? So when Ahiravana said, "Now bow your head there's a post with the sacrifice," and so Ram knows what to say. He says, "You see, Ahiravana, right? We're princes. We don't bow. We've never bowed to anybody. Everybody always bows, but we don't know how to bow. We've never bowed to anybody. Even actually, it's true. You see, even when a sage comes in, they'll do like this. They don't like lay on the floor, bow their head to the ground like we usually do. It's not their station to do so. So we have no experience. You show us how to do it. If you show us, we'll do it. Right? So this is where they got Ahiravana to put his head down to demonstrate how to do it. Right? And just then, Hanuman had to figure he has to break the spell of the 5 candles, the 5 diyas, and so he has to figure out how to blow the candle all 5 at the same time. So thus, 5 heads. Right? He manifested his Panchamukh form. Right? In some form, it just has him with having 5 heads and then blowing out. Later, as I develop, becomes now it's the form these 5 divine animal heads of Narasingha, Varaha, Hayagriva, who we just celebrated Hayagriva Jayanti a few days ago, Hayagriva, Garuda, and Hanuman. Right, these are the five heads. Right, and so he immediately broke the spell, and then while that was happening, so Ram was released, Ram and Lakshmana released. And I'm not sure if Hanuman grabbed the sword or Ram or the sword when he cut off the head of Ahiravana to sacrifice to Mother Kālī. So Mother Kālī, seeing all this, was pretty impressed. Right? It's like she's impressed with it. The whole thing is probably quite entertaining. The whole thing, all stupid things we do, hopefully entertain. Minimally, we provide entertainment for the Divine Mother. But she's especially impressed with Hanuman. And so she gives him a special boon. Just as you are known as a gatekeeper to Ram's kingdom, so you'll be the gatekeeper of my temples, my tirthas, my places. So she's one of the, what do you call, Kshetrapals. We have like properly in a Devi temple or Shiva temple, the proper Kshetrapal is Bhairava. We have our Bhairavas under the tree there, actually looking through the window right at Ma, right? He's looking at the back door, And he's the police officer. He's a police guard keeper because he has a very nice mustache. You have to have a mustache. Does our guards have a mustache? He better have a mustache. I one time asked, why do you have no mustache? You don't know he's a police officer. It's like the mustache is a very important part of Kshetrapal Bhairava. And so he's watching, and Hanuman also watches. And then another story attached to this is our story at Manasika Devi. It's a very ancient temple in the forest between Rishikesh and Dehradun. Right? That's where it's in the forest.
Is it
No. Manasika Devi. And so we've been there many, many times. And they also, one of these places has a huge Hanuman. The deity is kind of mysterious deity, like a pond or some frogs in it or something like that. That's not, it's like a well or something like that. I'm not sure if it's really an image that's worshipped there. Locally, they consider it like a Shakti Pitam. It's a very ancient tantric place mentioned in old texts, right? And so you have to hike into and when we got there, it was very clear that the Mahant there did not like us, and he was not impressed with us, and he didn't want to talk to us, and he wanted us to leave. And it could have been, we had some companions that I think may have had some run-ins with him in the past, so by connection, it's like, And so we figured, so we gave him a card, our little business card that had a picture of Ma.
in Kālī Mandir, our Rama like that. And I remember giving it to him. He's like, kind of like upset that now he has to be nice to us because we have a temple. One of those, like he had to be minimally. So he told him to go make tea or something like that, rather than just be rude to us until we leave type thing. So, but anyways, trying to figure out what to ask him, on different things. So when we finally sat down with him, a cup of tea, one of the things we asked is about Hanuman. Why is at that time I was doing research. Why is there Hanuman in every Kāli temple? Bhairava I understand, Ganesha I understand, and so he also said similarly. He says these things are not in books, right? These are things only you know by practice, right? He says when you're worshiping Devi, when you sit for meditation. He says, 3 things happen nobody knows. Nobody sees, but they happen. Right? He says, one, that the 2 dakinis, or some spiritual yoginis, dakinis, one of these, they come with pictures of amrita, and they bathe you. When you sit for meditation, that first thing they do, these astral beings, they come and purify you. You don't see, but they happen. They stand behind you. He said, and then Hanuman comes from behind you. And he puts a 9-string Brahman thread on you from behind, right? So this is maybe from his own experience, whether from his tradition or from his own experience. And then Bhairava comes with his club, and he circles around you, protect while you're doing your sadhana. Right? That was his answer to why Hanuman is there. So, anyways, Hanuman protects from all such spirits. So now we'll pick up where we left off. I think we've caught up. And now you have mantras, right? He gave you you found the sheets, right? Okay. So where are we then? So we did śrutiḥ, smṛtir-mahā-vidyā, guhya-vidyā, purātanī. Purātanī means the ancient, right? We talked about the difference between ma as old and oldest, and ma as ancient and primordial. So now it's cintyācintyā, Svāhā, Svadhā, nidrā, tandrā, pārvatī. So cintyācintyā. So we know this word Acintyā, right? You probably heard this distinctive. If you were to give like a philosophical name for the Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, they say it's Acintyā Beda Beda Tattva, right? I mean that it's Beda Beda. I mean there's both oneness and difference between the soul and God. But you say, well, how can the one be both one and difference? Or it's Acintyā, inconceivable, right? So that's where we get. So that's the common use of the word, and it's one of the meanings here. Cintyā, Acintyā means inconceivable. Cintyā means conceivable, right? Thinkable. So cintyā could be thought, and Acintyā means that which not thought or not beyond thinking, and cintyā could be thinkable and unthinkable. That's probably the way it's usually meant. Cintyā. So we have to take the 2 names together, I think, rather than one another. Cintyā. And we've in many discussions in Bhagavatam and things like that, we've talked a lot about this idea that using these words, this idea that actually there's a Swami Shivananda, one of his books, right, one of his 300 books, he says it's a simple it's almost too simple, but there's a point behind the definition. To define something is to deny it. One of his lines. To define something is to deny it. You see, by defining it, you give it, you're in a certain sense giving its limits. But something I used to say, to define a simple word, that's not denying the word, it's clarifying the word, right? But I think, and maybe I'm myself misquoting, maybe to define God is to deny God. It's probably the more accurate description of what he said, right? To define God is to deny God, because to define something it's exactly to give its limits, to give its a clear, unambiguous definition, right, or meaning, right? That's a definition. But why is it to define God is to deny God? Well, one of the meanings we have for the divine, for God, we say infinite, right? I mean, God is infinite. Is that infinite means without limits, and in one sense, a definition, right, a description, could be one of the, one of the definitions of definition. One of the definitions of description is to give a limit to something, or to describe it, not to give it, to describe its limits. Maybe that's so it's one thing if you're giving a limit to something that's not limited, then that's you're doing a big mistake, right? But also there's another mistake. That's a conscious mistake, right? You're limiting something that's not limited. You're trying to limit or describe, but also to even look for a limit to something that's not limited is a philosophical mistake, right? It's you just assume that it's impossible. There's no limit, but it doesn't mean that nothing can be said, right? This is why it's not just Acintyā, it's cintyācintyā. It's both conceivable and inconceivable, both unspeakable and and speakable. It's not that nothing can be thought about God, right? But you shouldn't think that thought is the limit, right? This is or the only. So Sri Ramakrishna is one of his famous stories is that an ant goes to a giant mountain of sugar. This is one of his famous. If you think of like there's a half dozen core stories of Sri Ramakrishna that revolutionized philosophical debate. This is one of them. Right? An ant is looking for food, and it comes across a giant hill of sugar, right? And he thinks to himself, right? He takes one in its mouth and puts one on its back to carry back to the home. And says, "Tomorrow I'll come and get the rest." Right? That there's no way the ant can consume, understand, hold, digest, whatever a mountain of sugar, not even a hill of sugar, right? And so Sri Ramakrishna would then say that even the great sages, and he specifically like Shankaracharya, like Dattatreya, like Sutta Goswami, speaker, and Sukadev, the speaker of the Bhagavatam. The great sages that are Paramahansa Avadhuts, right? Even the greatest sages, to whom we consider to be like God, and for us they're living deities or like that, right? They are at best big ants. That was Thakur's language, right? They're big ants at best, right? What does a big ant mean? It means it can hold more, right? It can eat more. It can carry more, right? That's a sage. Between a sage and a regular person, a sage can hold more. It can teach, can give more to others also, right? We're not. It's not meant to criticize the rishis, but to glorify the infinite nature of the absolute. So, but when you say, that you can't say anything about it, no, the ants could take some sugar in their mouth, and they can carry some sugar back, right? They can hold some, they can experience something, they can describe. It's like, it's sweet. That's a nice statement about if you eat a bunch of, even if you eat a tiny bit of sugar, you can say sugar is sweet, right? That's not a wrong thing to say. Maybe it's not a complete thing. All sugar, how much sugar have you tasted? You can start. It's like what do you know about sweetness? All the we only experience as large as we are, and we're not that large, right? But it doesn't mean that our experience is not true, right? What becomes not true is when you say this alone is true. My experience alone is correct, and my experience is defining the mountain of sugar, right? I know because I've tasted it. I was there, right? You can see this is the danger. We say I was there, I saw it. It's my experience if I know it's true. Most of us don't do that. We say I read it's there. Somebody else told me. I believe it, and that settles it. Bible's true. I believe it. That settles it. That's I remember. That's real simple. I saw a sign on driving across the desert once. Bible's true. I believe it. That settles it. The other one, then it was another trilogy, is Bible's true. Hell is hot. Eternity is a long time. Yeah, the two things we saw. Yeah, good things to remember. Two things to take with you home from tonight. So it's not that nothing can be said, right? Along with you have to be careful how you say it, right? And so you can see śrutiḥ, smṛtir, she's defining herself as śrutiḥ and smṛtir, as Vedamayi, as Veda Bhushana, right? And not only that, through all the thousands of names, thousands of names, right? So many things can be said about God, right? But the fact that we can say 1,000 things and never even come clear, we've never come clear to exhausting even one of the things, one of the names. We can keep talking and probably be only fractionally correct, what to be fractionally complete, right? That the infinite has an infinite, can be described infinitely, in infinite ways, by infinite distance, right? Story I've told many times here, but I think it's a good story to remember. The way I've heard the story is attributed to Neem Kālī Baba. I haven't found it in the text that way, so I'm not sure. But stories, pretty soon, Sri Ramakrishna told the story, Vivekananda told the story, now Neem Kālī Baba told the story. It just may be a great story, but it sounds like a Neem Kālī Baba story, so I'll tell it that way. Where somebody was saying that, but when I say Rama, doesn't that like limit God? Right, because that's like Rama instead of Krishna, or Rama instead of Shiva, and doesn't the name, because name and form in one sense are limits, and doesn't that limiting my relationship and making it now God only comes in this form and not in another form? You can see we sometimes think like that. My Jews are, is this the right one, or why one instead of another? Shouldn't we focus on everything or not focus on anything? There's people to tell you exactly these things. Each one of these, it's not just our natural confusion, it's people confusing us about these things, And so in the Neem Kālī Baba style, rather than answering, he often taught by setting a scene up, through his teaching scenes. So he changed the topic and was talking to other people, and then in the middle of the conversation, he asked that boy, "Can you please bring me some water?" And so he's like, I asked Atmaram to bring it. I did not have a nice. So he brings him a glass of water, and then Baba, or whoever the story is, it says, I didn't ask for a glass, I asked for water, right? And so the boy is, well, how am I going to bring you water, right? It says, so that's the teaching. It's like, if I ask for water and you bring me a glass of water, that's correct, right? And you're not saying, oh, this is, but how am I going to bring you water without a glass? A glass is not limit in one sense. If you say this alone is water, there's no other water than this, and then you're obviously limited. Then you're saying stupid. And somebody saying the things, you think these people are stupid or crazy or fanatical or whatever. Just not thinking or not, or saying things they themselves don't believe. All these things happen when people make such statements in religion too, right? But there's no other way to bring water. I mean, there may be other ways, but this is the most in the setting. This is the most natural way. Bring me water means bring me a glass of water. Right, and so the glass does not limit water; it reveals water. Right, as long as you don't think the revelation is absolute, and most of the time we think our revelation is absolute. Many people believe the revelation is, I shall drink a glass of water. I shall drink water from a glass. Sorry. Even that language is very good. Drink water from a glass, as much as a glass holds. Right, so. In the section in the Bhagavatam that we stopped a long time ago, eventually we'll pick it up again. It was and I think we're on the Brahma's prayer. Before that was the Guhyaka's the knocking down of the trees by baby Krishna, and when the two spirits come out, they give a very impressive philosophical discussion in their prayer, in the form of prayers to Lord Krishna, right? But one of the things he says, you are not knowable. That's one of the things they say, right? Because a creature, that's a good word. A creature cannot understand its creator, right? The source, it's always inferior to the source. Therefore, the something that comes, a secondary thing, can never fully understand the primary thing. And that this is actually a principle of logic too. There's a name for that principle. I don't remember it. So that's one thing. It says, so actually, there's no way that a finite being can understand the infinite, or a created being can understand the creator, or and then it goes. So that's the first thing, right? And then it says, but and also your limits cannot be known. You cannot be your forms and name. Your form and name cannot be known, right? Also, an agitated mind, it's impossible for an agitated mind to see you, right? And since our mind is agitated, everyone's mind is agitated. That's we use verses from the Yoga Sutra to describe that, right? Right. So 4 or 5 arguments he uses why Krishna, God, cannot be known or experienced. Nothing can be said. He cannot be seen, cannot be known, cannot be thought of, right? Yet, if we stop and remember what's happening, is these two spirits that were trapped in the tree are in fact seeing Lord Krishna, right? They are in fact worshiping him. Their prayers are worshiping him. They are saying things about him. They're seeing him, right? The same scene is a similar point in the same section is that of Mother Yashoda tying Krishna, right? That you can't tie Krishna, that's why. But eventually he allows himself to be tied, right? You know that starts to go by affection and love like this. But then there's a commentary verse that's shoved in the middle of the stotram, of the story, that says that even yogis, siddhas, liberated yogis, meditating for tens of thousands of yugas, I may be exaggerating the exaggerated form, thousands of years like that. It's actually because it's not possible to know the absolute. The absolute is never an object of knowledge. It's to know or not the knowledge, right? Not knowable, and it's infinite and we're finite, and it's the creation, not the creator, not the in all the different ways. It's impossible, right? Yet it says this cowherd girl has tied him up, right? So what she's bound, which is impossible to know. She's understood in a certain sense, not really completely. Actually, in that same section, it says that Krishna was dancing according to the dictates of the cowherd girls. They're making him dance and jump and clap and like this, right? So here's not only the one that can't be known out of love is known. Not only known, is actually controlled almost, actually, right? He's behaving according to the whims of the gopis, right? So the point, I mean, these are, I'm going big circle, but the one that can't be known started by devotion. You can know, right? That's one point of this story. But it's not that nothing can be. So much can be said about God. So much can be thought about God, right? There's a mantra. There's a did I write it down? Let me look if I wrote it down. Yes, this is I'll tell you, this is a controversial mantra. Shake everyone's faith, or build everyone's faith. But it's said. Upasakanam kartyartam brahmano rupa kalpana. Right? So for the sake of upasana, for the sake of worship, right? Or relationship, or contemplation, or meditation, right? In order to think about Brahman, right? In order to worship Brahman, says Brahmano rupa kalpana, a form or a name or a thought or descriptions or a philosophical system, is attributed to it. So this is, I have to be careful to say, it doesn't mean that these names don't actually, because we could do like that, we give a name, we give a form, or it reveals a name or reveals a form. So we have to be tricky how to say this, right? Sometimes you can say, we make God in our image. That's also often true, right? But sometimes God may reveal a form, reveal a name, reveal an image, right? In order for us to think, right? The kalpana, the kalpana means like common use is like imagination or a dream, right? So that's have to be careful. It's like, in order to worship Brahman, we dream something up about Brahman, and that definitely happens, right? So that's a completely legitimate reading of this verse, right? But also, kalpana philosophically means like an idea. So we have to have an idea to think about the infinite. So in order to think about the infinite, we create an idea, or we have an idea about it. Or another word for kalpana, even more technical, is like a hypothesis. Hypothesis. That the right word? Did I say that right? Hypothesis. So you assume with a hypothesis, you assume it's this until the truth is known, right? And so I'm just bouncing from one thought to another. But I remember Swami Bhajanananda. Every year he has another like theme that he presents. One year, one of the theme was that using algebra to describe devotion. So he says that you suppose A equals answer equals the answer is A, right? Or A, one of the propositions you put A in algebra, you put a letter for the answer, and then eventually when you figure it all out, using that as a stand-in, then you get the right answer, right? He says A is not exactly the answer. I know, even thinking about algebra is stressing me out, so I'll switch off this. I'll get off this topic momentarily. I don't like math examples, but So I didn't do good in algebra class. I admit to you right now. I wouldn't have been a good student of ancient philosophy. Required even to enter the schools. A lot of math. So A is not the answer, right? But without A, you can't come up with the answer, right? That's how algebra works. Something without positing something in its place, right? But what happens when you find the answer? A doesn't disappear. It merges into the answer, right? So then you know what we say A, and then we think, oh no, we can argue and defend and go to war and fight and criticize and start a website against somebody based on different A is the answer, B is the answer, like that. But it's just a placeholder, right? But it's not wrong. It's right. It's just we don't know what A is yet, right? Using A, you use that hypothesis, right? And then if it's correct, then the answer is given, and A becomes the actual answer, right? It gives place to the answer. So it's not raw. It's not imagined. Sometimes it's just imagination, but sometimes it's what we use to think about that which is by its definition beyond definition, by a thought beyond thought. Cintyā, God, and so Sri Ramakrishna also said, he said many times that God is the only thing, the only being that's never been, what is the word, uchista, or uchista means, you know this term, uchista means if you touch some the idea of like if somebody touches something with their lips, defiled, it becomes impure. Right? We don't have this idea in the Western idea. We eat off each other's plates and drink each other, but that's not a thing. Shouldn't be a thing. Stop it, all of you. Okay. Right. Right. Is that so it means that once it's touched the lips, right? It's not considered clean, right? And there's the hygienic things and subtle energetic hygiene, you could say, but even bacterial. I mean, bacteria spreads this way too, but it's more than that. So as a result, when we're eating, you have to be very careful. Like if I've used this glass and I've eaten, it's like I'm like even like there's ways that, like if I'm eating with my right hand and I have to grab something that's in common use, like a salt shaker or something, I'd use my left hand because my right hand has touched my mouth, and so in between the two, my left hand's cleaner, so I use the right hand. So things like that are important. Otherwise, like if you touch, now I can't touch your salt shaker. Nobody will touch the salt shaker. So you've touched your lips, and now you've touched the salt shaker, right? Even like if a glass can be poured like this, right? So if my hand's dirty, right, this hand is dirty, so I can use my left hand to pour this way, right? And then this glass is still clean. But if I touch my lips now, the glass is dirty, and now my hand's dirty. Now I've dirtied my left hand. Now neither hand's clean. But if you have a glass that doesn't pour properly, so just use your dirty hand so you don't dirty your. I mean, this is the science of perhaps this is uchista. This is what it means, jute or uchista, right? So this is a very strong principle of Hindu culture, right? Rabbinical culture, Hindu culture in general, and especially yogis take it to the next extreme, right? Even beyond other things. But the point is that, God has never been uchista, means he's never touched the lips. So certainly by saying it's speakable is to make it impure. That's the idea, because it touched the lips. This is a metaphor, obviously, right? And so God is still completely pure. Because he's never, it's definitely she, what she definitely is, has never definitely been said. Right? He's never been spoken. Yet Sri Ramakrishna spent hours a day speaking about God, singing to God, singing about God, chanting God's name. And when M asked in the first pages of the Kathamrita, what's the way for us to remember God and think of God? And like he says, to chant God's names, God's names and glories, his qualities, names and qualities, talk about God all the time without ceasing. What's the word for without ceasing there? How is it? Sharuda, at all times, right? So that's actually left out of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It says chant God's names and say God's names and glories, but it says without all the time. So what's the value of saying God's names and glories when God's names and glories are not God's names and glories, right? These are imperfect, finite, blasphemous descriptions of the infinite, pure, non-dual reality. So there's an interesting story. There's a wonderful saint. He was head of the Gita Press, Swami Ram Sukhadas Ji. Very interesting person. If you look him up, you won't find his picture. He never allowed a single photograph to be taken of him. He was very radically humble, you could say. And but anyways, in one lecture or footnote or something like that I read, he told the story I may have told the story here also to illustrate a similar point. So a granddaughter goes to her grandson, and he has at the fireplace. There's a basket where you keep like coal, right? Wire basket. You've probably seen like a wire basket where you keep the coal or wood for the fireplace, and it's very dirty, right? And so, but anyways, he tells his granddaughter, "Go to the river and fill it with water and bring it for me." Right, and she's like holding a wire basket, fill it with water. So crazy granddad's getting old, it's like to placate him, to appease him, or what is it when you talk? Anyway, so she goes and she comes back, and of course there's no water. You take a wire basket to the river, it's not going to have any water in it. Well, thank you very much. He put this. Next day, he says, "Honey, I need more water. Can you get me another basket full of water, please?" He goes, and again, so this goes on day after day after day, and finally the granddaughter says, "Granddad, this is ridiculous, right? There's not a drop of water has come." And he says, "But look, now the basket is clean," right? So the very process of doing day by day completely transformed the basket. Of course, God cannot be trapped in human language, human ideas, and human like this, but the process changes us. Right, and we can, and even though we can never, in certain sense, we hold more, or we hold less. I don't know what to say it. There's similar, it's not exactly identical things, but there's similar traditions in Western theology and mystical theology. What is the what's the word? Apophatic and catophatic, right? Apophatic theology, maybe heard this term, maybe not. It's like the negative path or the positive path, right? Is whether or not you can say, in one sense, the many mystics, or some famous mystics, that will say that nothing can be said about God. And actually, most mystics, one of the if you were to look at similarities through various religious traditions of what we call mystics, what we recognizably put into a category of similar type of mystic, even though their beliefs and practices and conclusions are very different, most of them will end up saying, many of them will say that, "Oh, what I've experienced can't be spoken." They'll often say like that. It's a very common thing to say. It's one of the things that makes we classify into that they've had some sort of a mystical experience, right? Rather than the other types of direct religious experiences, right? It's, "Oh no, it's like God came to me, He told me this, and was it no? It's exactly, I know He told me, right? And He told me exactly what to say and what to tell you. It's a different. That's also a type of powerful religious experience, but it's not this idea that what I've experienced is beyond words. It becomes an ecstatic experience beyond the mind, beyond words like that. Yet they usually say a lot about these things, but they use this language, this dualistic language of both describing and not describing like this. And then there's some sophisticated Catholic theologians, Christian theologians that go and start describing that even that nothing positive can be said about God at all, about Brahman at all. And even statements that seem to be saying something positive are actually not. They're negating qualities. What's the example in? We just discussed a lot of this. The saying that God is. What's the description in the Brahma Sutra? Or in the Upanishad, it says Satyam Jnanam. That's the one. That's a classic example in my brain. Like for instance, the saying is that by saying God is jnanam, knowledge, right? It's actually saying that God is not ignorance, not saying that God actually is knowledge. Because that's saying something about God, about the infinite, about Brahman is itself a mistake. So you can take that to an extreme, and there's forms of Christianity that have developed that a lot. And there's others that just outpouring of the heart through all positive qualities. But the idea that even if you can say definite things about God, you can't exhaust God's nature. Sri Ramakrishna went into ecstasy he meant ecstasy a lot. When a verse from Shiva Mahimna Stotram was recited at the Shiva temple just near his room, and the verse is, if Goddess Saraswati were the scribe, and the Mandara mountain, the center of the world, was the pen, and the oceans were the ink, and the mountain Himalayas were the paper, and all eternity, I had all eternity. Your name, your glories could never be exhausted, right? But this is the idea that God's glories could, that idea that God's qualities and glories and names and forms and can never be exhausted itself. It's immediately threw Ramakrishna into samadhi, and he went and he embraced Lord Shiva, right? And embraced the Shiva lingam. So the idea of God's infinitude, from God's glories to the unending nature of God's glories, that's actually God's greatest glory, is his infinitude, his Acintyā. Anyway, this is a long time on Cintyā, but I like these topics. And Acintyā. Unthinkable and thinkable. Any questions thus far, or before I next cool? Yes, Tom.
In Judaism, they don't, they write it G-D.
Yeah.
You can't pronounce the name of that, but that was interesting that you said
Yeah,
there's a ton of
yeah. Because in one sense that there's we jokingly debated this very point in Judaism the other day in the car. I won't tell you what we said. Sometime in order to get there, you have to go through various levels of heresy and blasphemy in order to get to the final point. I won't tell you how we got there. But you have to have mental freedom to think clearly, But that view that God's name is not pronounceable, right? Is one thing is that it's so intimate. It's not a speakable word, right? It's not a thinkable idea. God's infinite like that. But there's other things. No, it's pronounceable, but it's secret, right? So then you have this guhya-vidyā. There is knowledge of God. There's regular knowledge of God. The scriptures are full of. The Bible starts with in the beginning, right? It's like it starts with how He created. It may be symbolic, maybe actual, maybe whatever. It's describing all kinds of things about God's nature, activities, power, majesty, relationship. Like this, anger, whatever the things of saying all kinds of things about God. But then it also says that there's some things that are still secret, right? That you have to be qualified, right? That's another way of thinking of this of the unspoken name.
That's like the first commandment, right? Not to take the
Not name God. Yeah, yes. So I know. So some people say, well, but the way you know the secret is like. One name for the one way of describing the Pravana mantra, the Omkara mantra, is also Anahata Dvani. This is the unstruck sound. So we can say, we can chant Om and say Om, right? And write Om, and tattoo Oms even, like all the put it on the back of our Jeep and the whole thing, we can do Oms everywhere, right? But actually, in one sense, it's not pronounceable. Right, it's never been pronounced. It's always there. Back, that's one way of thinking. It has to be. You have to tune yourself to it, to recall it. But also, it's in one sense, it's also not the real Om is not pronounceable. Also, right. So it could be things like this also. But the idea of secret, but also like that's of course they have many words and names for God, but the name, and then it's even given in syllables that can't be pronounced. It's missing how to pronounce it. But most likely there is a way to pronounce it. Scholars know how it's most likely pronounced, But there's mystics who say, no, you can't pronounce it. You have to be qualified to pronounce it. We don't have the tongue to pronounce it yet, perhaps, And you can see, we could even say, I'm not going to, just out of politeness, I'm not now going to say what I think what most scholars believe the pronunciation of the name of God is in Judaism. We don't do like that. But Like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya says that, I mentioned this last week, I think, or the week before that, by saying the two syllables Krishna, that more sins that are possible to commit are destroyed. Right? That's a standard layer. So we say Krishna, 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 and all of our sins seem to be pretty much in place, you know. At least mine mostly in place. Maybe a little bit, but sometimes actually saying Krishna, Krishna, Krishna causes you to sin more. You know, there's all around the reasons, you know. You have to be very careful, right? And so he says, and he quotes a verse. There's a verse quoted from Padma Purana, which I wasn't prepared, but I have to think if I remember it. It says that God's name, like God, is non-different from God, therefore is nitya, shuddha. Nitya means always free, not conditioned. Shuddha, always pure. Nitya, shuddha, anantam, it's infinite. And somewhere I'm forgetting, but it means like all powerful. You know, it's like it's powerful, it's pure, it's liberated, like that. So the name is still there, but we've said Krishna, and all of our sins are pretty much the same or worse. And so what's happened? It's not the name's fault, right? We haven't really said the name. That's the thing, you know, to say the name's not easy. And so until then, we say Krishna, 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 and tonight we'll say Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Janmashtami coming, lots of Krishna, Krishna, Krishna this next month, next couple of weeks, all about Krishna, right? And we hope that slowly we'll purify the consciousness, so that when we say the Shuddhanam, the pure name, then we have a full illumination. Actually, it says in Vaishnava Tantra Shastra that Shuddhanam, when the name is said purely, right, then every name is a full revelation, right, a darshan, right. But you can see that's not the name that can be, you know, what is it? The Tao that can be spoken is not, or what is that line? The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, something like. There's some line like that. Or the Tao that can be spoken is not the real Tao, something like this, right? See Buddha on the street, kill him, type thing, you know. There's a thing because it's not the real Buddha. There's lots of things like that. As soon as what we can think. If we're thinking it, it's probably not right? Because we're not right yet, right? And actually, the infinite can only really be thought of by the infinite. That's where Ramakrishna said, Brahman alone realizes Brahman, right? You know, so we will know. We should know as much as we can know. We don't need to know, and that's another point. We don't need to know everything. Another thing Ramakrishna said that there may or may not be lots of wine, in Laguna Beach itself. There's lots of bars, lots of liquor stores. Right, lots of there's lots of places to buy alcohol in Laguna Beach. Right, how much there is, what are the qualities, what are the brands? We don't need to know. One bottle is probably sufficient to get you drunk. That's what Ramakrishna said. Right, so we don't need to know everything. We need to know enough for us to So therefore, he is Cintyā. We can know something of. She is Cintyā. We can know something about God. We can say something about God. But know that what we're saying is not the full thing, right? We should be humble about our own thoughts, I think so, and our own beliefs, and also our own level of understanding of our own thoughts. Because something you say, okay, they're not my thoughts; these are the thoughts of my guru, these are the thoughts of the scriptures, of the avatar, of the age. You know, we can start like that. We should be humble about our own understanding of the thoughts of our guru, the avatar, the scriptures. You know. Because even if they're absolute and true and perfect in every way, our understanding of it isn't, right? So we should be humble about it. So we often say, when I used to be invited more often to high school interreligious type of things, and when you introduce your religion in 10 words or less type thing, going, what do you say to like a group of high school kids, right? Here's your chance. Right. So I remember every time my opening statement was always something along these lines about the mountain of sugar, and I use that example like that. And I'd say, well, Brahman, the philosophical name for the kalpana for the absolute means infinitely big, right? It comes from briha, which is huge, beyond huge, right? Bigger than big. That's what we mean by infinite usually, right? So God, the truth, Brahman, is infinitely big. And whatever we are in our current configuration is really, really small, right? So we have to at least be a little humble about we're really small and God's infinitely big. That's fine. I'm totally cool with us being really small and God being really, really big. That's the way it should be, I think. That's the way God made it this way. I am one. She. Sorry, I keep using these careful words. She. Make sure. God definitely. So the thing is that therefore any absolute statement by a finite mind about the absolute infinite being should be taken with suspicion, right? Or at least caution, or at least, or maybe broad-minded, compassionate understanding, perhaps, right? Rather than blasphemy, right? We shouldn't do like that, right? Because we're all giving it the best shot, right? But we should be humble and therefore any statement about the only way, the final, any you put in all the final book, or if there's this or the only way, the only mantra, or the only guru, highest philosophy, whatever the you can put in whatever condition is, right? We should be a little careful. But so God is Acintyā, but also Cintyā. That's the point. Okay, pretty good. Cintyā. Where are we? What's the next?
Svadhā.
Svāhā. Okay, good. Svadhā, right? Let's go to. So we mentioned last couple of weeks that this collection of names seems to follow a lot verses from the Chandi, from the Rakti Suttam, from the Rakti Suttam of the Chandi, where it says Mahā-vidyā, Mahā-maya, Maharatri, Kalaratri, Moharatri, all the Daruna, all these names, Mahasuri, all these. It seems to be this weaving in this. So here again, it's the very first verse of the Brahma Sutti or the Rati Sutti from the Chandi. This is when Vishnu is asleep, Brahma has come out, is on the lotus, and Madhu and Kaitaba, two demons, have come out of the ear wax of Brahma, of Shiva, of Vishnu, and attacked Brahma. And Brahma, not knowing what to do, he realizes he needs to awaken Vishnu, right? But he's pulled on the cord as much as he could, and Vishnu is deep asleep because he's in yoga nidrā, in the sleep of yoga. And one of the verses says, even at the end of this little hymn, he says, Brahma prays, by your power, even Vishnu's God, and he's asleep. What to speak of everybody else? I mean, you put even Vishnu to sleep. You've made Vishnu, Brahma, and myself, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva take bodies. This is your power, right, of Mahamaya, right? So please withdraw your Mahamaya. Withdraw your yoga nidrā, here described as yoga nidrā, and let Vishnu awaken. When he awakens, he can kill Madhu and Kaitaba, and then I can go on creating the universe as per Vedic dictums, Vedic instructions, as I've done before, right? But it starts with Tvam Svāhā, Tvam Svadhā, Tvam Hi. So it starts with you are Svāhā, you are Svadhā, right? Here it's Svadhā and Svāhā. It reverses it. Tvam Hi Vashat Kara Sarvatmika. You are the subtle aspects of all sound. So in one sense it's saying it starts with you are Svāhā and Svāhā. These are the very popular Vedic mantras. Right, we'll go into them a little bit. We have a few minutes to do so. And then it says, Shudha Tvam Akshara Nitye Tridha Matratmika Sita. You are the three letters and their you are the embodiment of the three letters. So here are the three letters, most likely, it's interpreted as Om, A, U, The next mantra, and you are the secret fourth letter, which is the silence from which they come, the Chandra Bindu, and its special mode of pronunciation. Interesting, there it says a special mode of pronunciation could be a way, from the Hindu perspective, a way of saying this, the secret name of God, right? We have Om, but we don't know how to pronounce it. It's secret way of pronunciation, how to really say it. Right? To say Om is not the same as to, you have to know the secret. You are its Om, the letters of Om, as well as the secret way of pronouncing its unspoken fourth letter. So that's a very fascinating topic. But it starts Tvam Svāhā, Tvam Svadhā, Tvam Hi. And actually in this, you are creator, you exist as creation, you are support of all activities, you are destruction at the time of dissolution, you are the bewitcher of the world, you are Maha-vidyā, Maha-maya, Mahameda, Mahaspeed. We went through these verses. You are knowledge and ignorance and night. So what is this when Brahma is asking Ma, withdraw your Mahamaya, withdraw your sleep, right? What is he doing? He actually, at the very end, he says, please wake up Vishnu. This is the process of waking up, when realizing, oh, you are sound, you are form, you are knowledge, you are people, you are ignorance, you are, it's like, it's when the waking up process is seeing Ma as everything and behind everything. Right, and so it's interesting. It starts with Svāhā and Svadhā. Very interesting. Later in the Chandi, it says, by the mantra Svāhā, all the devas are satisfied, and by the mantra Svadhā, all the ancestors are satisfied. Right, this is the Chandi. These two places it's there. So we can go a little bit in a very limited time what Svāhā and Svadhā mean. So there's in mantras, there's masculine, feminine, and neuter mantras, right? This is what we'll start with this level, right? And so certain mantras are not only by grammatical, just like, grammatically, certain words are feminine or masculine. In Sanskrit also, it's a gendered language, right? But by concept also. But here it's like, so Svāhā, Svadhā, Vashat, Vaushat, these mantras are considered feminine, right? Which means they have a nurturing. This is a gendered language. This is a self-gendered language and gendered ideas. So please forgive. But this means that that these are nurturing. They're feeding. They harmonizing, right? And then there's like hum and put. These are masculine mantras. These are aggressive. These are weapon mantras. These burn, protect, and they're sharp, right? These are macho mantras, maybe a better way to say it. Rather than masculine, we'll say macho masculine, like a new category, right? And then there's mantras like namaha. They're simply I bow to. These are neither masculine nor feminine. That's a simple thing. So Svāhā and Svadhā are two feminine mantras. Being feminine mantras, they're also devatas. They're devis. Right, and so in a simple thing, we could just, in a very simple way, we say that there's two wives of Agni. There's very complicated and fascinating story how they became, as per legend, how they became the wives of Agni. But these are a simple thing that they're the wives of Agni, Vashat, and so in puja we use Svāhā or Svadhā. Here we almost exclusively use Svāhā, unless we're doing a Shraddha, which we don't do, that's why we don't, but we ceremonies for the ancestors, worship of the ancestors, offering oblations for the ancestors. We don't generally do, as sannyasis we're not supposed to do, so as a result we don't do those pujas very much. Many priests will do a lot of that. These are very common mantras because they're doing things for the ancestors, to placate the ancestors, feed and bless the ancestors. It's Svadhā. But these are he's supposed to have, Agni has two primary wives in this version of the story. We are doing okay? Okay. So, in the story of Daksha, right, Daksha and Sati, and we all know that wonderful story for. So Daksha had. I don't think I wrote it down. No, I think he had 16, 15, 16, 17, maybe 18 daughters, as per some stories, right? These are symbolic things. So 14 or 15 daughters were married to the moon. These are the digits of the moon, right? And Rohini is his favorite. So these are the different nakshatras or stages or phases of the moon, you could probably say, right? 15 or 16, like this. And there's a whole story of the moon only likes one of them and he got cursed that he died. There's wonderful stories in Puranas for there. But and then of course his final daughter was Sati, right? Who, of course, he didn't want to marry Shiva, but she decided to marry Shiva. But two other daughters, according to the story, is Svāhā and Svadhā, right? And those he gave to Agni for his as wives. So Svadhā, he's the Agni's wife, and she gives birth in the stories to the Pitris, which is interesting, to the ancestors, right? So it's interesting because, we die and go to the world of the ancestors, but the ancestors as a category of being was like the gods are a category of being that are supposed to have been birthed by Aditi or Daititi and these type of Kashapa. So the ancestor realm was birthed by fire, and it may have this could be a reaction or a description of cremation also. The fire gives birth to the world of the cremation fire is a way to the holy cremation fire is a way to the ancestral realm. So we can interpret it maybe this way, right? So I'm going to read just a couple paragraphs from the Devi Bhagavatam, which I love. So Devi Bhagavatam has very elaborate, if you're interested in Devi Bhagavatam, there's a whole large chapter on Svāhā and Svadhā. There may even be like 1,000 names of Svāhā. I'm not sure. I know Gayatri Sahasranāma, there's a bunch of Sahasranāma, even for these kind of minor deities. And the Devi Bhagavatam gives a lot of Sahasranāmas. I don't think, but a big story is there. Brahma, then, this is, Brahma is the, she is the mind-born daughter of Brahma as per Devi Bhagavatam, not the daughter of Daksha, right? In Devi Bhagavatam, he created out of his mind one daughter, very beautiful, full of youth, and having a face lovely, as of equal to 100 moons. That woman was best in all respects, whether in form, beauty, qualities, or learning. Her color was white, like the champa flower, and her body was adorned all over with jeweled ornaments. This form was very pure, ready to grant boons, auspicious, and part of Prakriti. Her face was beaming with smiles, her teeth were very beautiful, and her body showed signs of Lakshmi. Her name was Svadhā. Her lotus feet were situated on 100 lotuses. She was the wife of the Pitris. Here she's the wife of the ancestors, not the mother of the ancestors. Right? Her face resembled a lotus, and her eyes looked like water lilies. She was born of the lotus-born Brahma. The grandfather Brahma made over that daughter of the nature of tushti. So tushti means contentment, right? And one of the things, this is an interesting thing, is that why we do this mantra Svāhā is so that our ancestors in the other side of the world, other side of the world of birth and death, is are satisfied. We want them to be happy, right? And we say actually some of the mantras is triptam, triptam, tushtam, tushtam. May you be satisfied. May you be happy. May you be like triptim, tushti. Same thing. Yeah? There's tripti there, So this is one of the things that she's nature of tushti or tripti. To the hand. The grandfather Bhishma made over that daughter of the nature of tushti or tripti to the hands of the Pitris, the ancestors, and they were satisfied. Brahma advised the Brahmanas privately that whenever they would offer anything to the Pitris, they should offer duly with the mantra Svadhā, pronounced at the end. Since then, the Brahmanas are offering everything to the Pitris with the mantra Svāhā uttered at the end. Svāhā, now, so the other Svāhā, when offering, is laudable when offerings are presented to the gods, and Svadhā is commendable when offerings made to the Prithvis. But in both cases, dakshina is essential. This is one of the points, right? Without dakshina, this is the money or the fee given to the priest, right? All sacrifices are useless and worthless. This is from the Devi Bhagavatam. The Prithvis, the ancestors, the devatas, the gods, the brahmanas, the munis, the manus, worshipped the peaceful Svadhā and chanted hymns with her with great love. The devas, pitris, brahmanas were pleased and felt that their ends achieved when they got the boon from Svadhā Devi. Right. So it's interesting. So this is that. Okay, it's one of the wives of Brahma. It's a mantra that takes the offerings of the ancestors. There's a connection to Daksha, connection to Brahma. All these are mythological stories to describe the importance of Svadhā. But we can go a little. We can't now, but we could if we had time go deeper into Svadhā. I just mentioned a few things. Svadhā prisho dasyadaha. There's one mantra, which means something like Svadhā means, what does Swa mean? Swa means one's own. Swadharma, Swaraj, self-rule, these that we use, we have this word. So Svadhā means one's own nature or one's own determination, which is interesting. So you can go into the psychological deeper. It also has a meanings like, almost like śrutiḥ, like your own spontaneous personality, like this, right? One's own will, one's own pleasure, right? So Andre, you can go more into that. So because just to finish this, I'm gonna say a few things about Svāhā, and then we'll end there. All kinds of things. The next verse has so many cool mantras, but we'll end with this one. You are the mantra Svadhā, and you are the mantra Svāhā. So now it's the Svāhā. Svāhā Yue Namaha. This is especially in Rig Veda. This is found, and it's connected to Agni again, or to Indra. So in some of the texts, actually, she was a nymph, probably a apsara, right? Probably the way we'd say, and she was married to Agni, and she's also considered a daughter of Daksha. She's and she presides over burnt offerings. Of course, that's a weird thing, but that's a biblical thing. But here's when you say Svāhā, like this, and actually when you say Svāhā, right? That's the fire opening its mouth. And so, very careful when you come up to throw into the fire, that you go oh Magnaye Svāhā, right, and then you like that, and then everybody else after the point throws fire. And then you're throwing food at somebody's closed mouth. You have to do it when the mouth is open. And I remember one time we were at the ashram in Allahabad, our Guru's ashram. I was doing special puja, and I was like Om Sri Durgaye Namaha Svāhā, it's like, and then a pujari, the one who did my sannyas initiation, right? He took me to his room and said Svāhā Namaha Nahi, right? When fire you don't say Namaha. Has to be. I didn't want to break the mantra. I don't want to add Svāhā. No, because Namaha closing the mouth, right? Svāhā is opening the mouth. He said, and he quoted some verse that's saying it is wrong. You quoted a Vedic verse of the mistake I was making. So okay. Yeah. Every year he says he practices English to correct my puja. I'm practicing, knowing next year you're coming, so I can correct more of your. So it makes it nowadays. It's like I lost a lot of my confidence around him, but very good pujari, very good. He's a Sanskrit teacher for all of our kids, right? So I'll end with a little story told in the Mahabharata. Mahabharata has so many stories. It's truly said that if it's not in the Mahabharata, it doesn't exist, right? If it's in the Mahabharata, it exists. So there's a story of Markandeya tells a story to the Pandavas. Svāhā, the daughter of Daksha, right? She fell in love with Agni, right? But Agni is very beautiful, very handsome, fiery personality, and fell in love with Agni. And so Agni was invited to the house of Daksha to do a sacrifice. And if you've seen the Devanki Dev Mahadev videos, there's always, the Sapta Rishis are always there, right? They're the constant companions of Daksha. And so Svāhā, because this is her house, right? She's one of the daughters of Daksha. And so Agni was present, and the seven sages. So Svāhā fell in love with Agni. And Agni mentally was infatuated by the beautiful wives of the Saptarishis, right? So everybody's mind's not controlled, This is nothing new. It's been going on since the beginning. And so after the puja, Agni feels horrible, because one thing is bad enough. Jesus says, so even lust after another man's wife is adultery, right? What to speak of rishis? He was lusting after the wives of rishis. Right, that can't be good. So feeling really bad about himself, like he should, right? He went into the forest to do penance, right? So Svāhā followed him out, right? And then she took on the form of the wives of the Saptarishis, right? And says, "Oh, we also fell in love with you when we saw you there, right? And so they had their romantic dalliances, right? But that time, now they're as good as married, even though she impersonated the wives of the rishis, and tricked Agni. But now she's connected to Agni, so you can't. Whenever there's Agni, there's always Svāhā. But you can see that potentially no interpretation. The verse, the story is just interesting. Little story is told, but you can probably imagine some meaning that she, because actually Svāhā and Svadhā, they're connected to the shaktis of every devata, you can't worship any devata, any rishi without these mantras, right? They're the way to access the shakti of the rishis. So the next is nidrā, tandrā, pārvatī. Nila means sleep, tandrā means sleepy or waking up, and pārvatī. And you'll see and then aparna, nischala, lola, very interesting names. These are going to deal a lot with esoterically interpreted to deal with kundalini and those type of issues. But we'll wait for and what's asleep, what's awakening in the body. We'll interpret, we'll justify our interpretation this way, but we'll pick up next week. Any other comments you have before we jump into the next activity? No questions, no comments, no challenges. More? Any flower garlands? Flower garlands. Okay. So I have all these. I had Bhagavad Gita verses to read about tapasya, but we didn't quite. I don't know why I was thinking we could get to the next batch of names, but thank you anyway. Thank you for your kind attention. Continue next time.